According to Municipal IQ, South Africa experienced 123 service delivery protests in the first half of 2023. Poor service delivery has seen citizens across the country take to the streets to highlight their frustration with their local governments. And as the country heads to the polls in a few weeks, more protests are expected as communities intensify their demand for basic services such as water and electricity. Good evening, welcome to Unfiltered. I'm your host, Sizwe Mpofu Walsh. As municipalities around the country struggle to provide basic services, communities say they're taking strain under the high cost of municipal charges. As is the case with the residents of Zwelihle Township in Hermanus, Western Cape. Many say access to services has become a luxury as they are saddled with exorbitant bills that they're unable to pay. This often results in households being disconnected, leaving them without electricity or water. And so tonight we ask, have basic services become unaffordable? In studio this evening, we are joined by the Chief of Operations for the South African Local Government Association, welcoming back Mr. Lance Joel. We also welcome organizer and campaigner for the socialist movement, Zaki Mamdu, as well as founder of the Zwelihle Renewal, Kobani Nzongana. We had reached out to the DA Mayor of the Overstrand Municipality, Dr. Annelie Rabi, and she unfortunately declined to participate this evening. Before we continue with our discussion, let's take a look at the following clips for some of the residents of the Hermanus to have a look at their municipal challenges.
The DA municipality in the Overstrand is on a mission to keep our people in poverty, to reduce them to criminals. Our people live in low-cost housing, but pay up to 5,000 rand for water and electricity. They want to keep our people poor for the benefit of the rich people in Hermanus. They don't care about our colored, black and poor communities.
The
municipality wants 4,000 rand. I don't have it. Even my water is disconnected. I can't complain to the municipality because I'm not paying the rates at the end of the month. No one is working. Everyone depends on me. It will be better if I can get help.
Mr. Nzongana, of course, Zwelihle is an interesting window into South Africa. Hermanus is a place where the rich have their third homes, and right next door we've got many service delivery protests. Tell us about some of your experiences campaigning and speaking up for service delivery in Zwelihle.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity that you gave me to be part of this program. Sorry, I've got a flu, man.
No problem. Thank you for joining us.
Zwelihle, Hermanus is one of the richest places that many people do not know. It's rich on abalone. It's one of the aqua farm. It's got the biggest aqua farm area in Africa. I mean, you've got now this community that is a black community and also some colored community called Mount Pleasant and Zwelihle. Now, next to those communities, you've got posh houses where you find the houses of Rupert, Oppenheimers, Euster, and many other rich Stellenbosch boys. So what is happening in Hermanus, it's what you call a gentrification. Gentrification whereby the municipalities, particularly the rich, make sure that they raise the rates so that the people who are poor, including the police or teachers, everyone cannot afford to live in that town. It's a strategy of getting those people, that community away so that the richer can get more land so that it can be a heaven of rich people. So you can call it a second Orania. That is what you can say. So it's a sad situation because, you can say, and a basic income household in Hermanus, let's say it's 5,000 rand. Many people are working in farms. Many people are working in restaurants. But I can assure you now, things are worse because, in fact, the rest population, which is our local South Africans, are not working. more people who are working in restaurants, even in these wines, are more of foreign nationals, which make, it definitely is going to be some sort of a protest very soon in Hermanus.
Right. Mr. Joel, of course, you come at this from the Salga perspective. Zwelihle is a microcosm of a wider question in South Africa. The price of municipal services, help us understand where we are in South Africa with this question.
Well, thank you very much, Sizwe, and greetings to yourself as well as the panelists and
welcome back.
the viewers at home. Thanks for having us once more. Well, it's a very complex question, and maybe I could just answer it simply in that, of course, municipalities have a constitutional obligation to deliver services, and unfortunately, services come at a cost for the municipality and for the users of the service itself. And when you look at the cost components for municipalities, there are two parts. To explain it simply, there is the capital part. Essentially, it is putting the infrastructure in place in order to provide the service. So that's the one component. The second component is the operating cost. It is to sustain the delivery of that service. Now, the unfortunate reality, when we look at the operating cost, there is a component there that talks about bulk tariff. So, for instance, municipalities are price takers, meaning a municipality would buy water from a water board. A municipality will buy electricity from Eskom. Eskom is the only one that provides electricity to municipalities. And both of those tariffs are regulated and approved annually. And despite the fact that as the South African Local Government Association, we have challenged every single year the increases that are set for these tariffs, we have not been successful. And we have seen annual increases to the prices of electricity and the prices of water. And the unfortunate reality is that municipalities must pass on that cost together with its operational costs to the end user, which is household, business, and to an extent government as well. So that's the unfortunate reality that we are sitting with. Is that the problem is not necessarily sitting with a municipality, is the fact that we are already paying high prices for bulk electricity, for bulk water.
Mr. Mamdu, what do you think of what we've heard? We've got a snapshot from Zwelihle. Of course, we've understood the way that these prices are set. What do you make of where we sit in South Africa currently with the cost of services?
I mean, look, I think the snapshot from Zwelihle tells a story of a much broader and widespread crisis that we find ourselves in across our communities, across our municipalities. I mean, 90% of municipalities are dysfunctional and are in total disarray and collapse. I think it's important to note that these ongoing and perpetual increases to rates and taxes has a dire effect on ordinary working people, on poor people, and on the working class. It is such that within a context of a cost of living crisis, within a context in which nearly half of the population is unemployed, and within a context where even those, a huge portion of those who do have jobs earn well below 6,000 Rand, what these increases and these high rates and taxes mean is that families and ordinary people are put in a position where they are forced to choose between putting food on the table or having electricity and lights that are on, forced to choose between having access to clean drinking water and being able to afford transport to travel to and from work. And within our context, what we hold as the Socialist Youth Movement, as the Workers' and Socialist Party, that ultimately that is a choice that no person should be forced to make. Now, we would go further in saying that there are two reasons for this crisis that we find ourselves in at the local government level and within our municipalities. And the one is certainly that this is a result of the ANC's neoliberal program of austerity. It is a result of the cuts to public spending that we see year after year, which essentially mean that municipalities have to fill the gap and they have to come in and in turn place that burden squarely onto the shoulders of ordinary people through taxing them and charging exorbitant rates. And the other issue that we must bring a lot of attention to is the issue of corruption within municipalities. I mean, we know, and there are countless examples that can be made around the tenderpreneuring, right? And the way in which public funds are looted in their millions and billions in that way.
Right.
And of course, the other thing that I think we must bring attention to here.
Well, let's leave it there for now,
Sure.
so I can bring in some of my other guests as well. But I guess the question, in some way, raised by, the interventions, Mr. Joel, if I can come to you, is also, to what extent do you think we have a service delivery crisis in South Africa? Because on the one hand, there's the raise, you've taken us through how the rates are set, but then the other hand is whether the services actually get delivered in the end.
Well, Sizwe, I think let's be factual. As a starting point, tomorrow, Stats SA, whom we rely on for statistics, is going to issue a report that would confirm, from the delivery services point of view, basic services, water, sanitation, electricity, refuse removal, between the year 2021 to 2022, up to the end of June 2022, we have seen steady increases. So we've seen an increase in the extension of services to communities. And we have seen, certainly, in most municipalities, the sustainability of services. Of course, there are weaknesses in the system. Of course, there are municipalities where there are challenges being experienced to not only deliver services timelessly, but sustain the delivery of those services. And there are many reasons that would form and underlie why those difficulties are being experienced. One of them could be, and essential is the fact that municipalities are owed in excess of 338 billion rands. 338 billion rands owed to municipalities for services they have already delivered. Of course, everyone talks about how municipalities owe others, but that figure is only sitting at 104 billion. So
Right.
municipalities owe to others 104 billion, but is owed 338 billion. Now, if municipalities are able to collect the 338 billion, it will assist in contributing towards sustaining the delivery of services, which is the biggest weakness municipalities are experiencing.
Let's go to a break, and when we come back, we'll pick up on some of the interventions that our panelists have made. Service delivery and also the cost of services have become crucial issues on South Africa's political landscape, and this evening we're delving into specific stories of service delivery provision, non-provision, and also the debates that surround this question. Stick with us, we'll be back after this. Welcome back to Unfiltered. There can be no more central question in any country than, are you getting the services that you pay for? And this is the question that we're asking tonight to a diverse panel of experts and guests. Mr. Nzongana, one of the questions in our country as well, which is exemplified in Zwelihle, is services being delivered to poor areas versus rich areas, even when they can be very close together geographically. What are your thoughts on what Zwelihle tells us about that picture?
Yeah, look, it tells us about the issue of inequality. I think there was a study that came recently, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2015, that, Hermanus is the most unequal town. Hermanus is the most unequal town in South Africa. And if you look, even how the things are happening, you look on the issue of the economy, businesses, in private sector, who owns it? You'll find that it's the Zwelihle, which is the local town for black people, it's just a place for labor, for the rich to become able to harvest the labor so that they can work in their homes. Now, one of the challenges in Hermanas, it's an issue of privatization. For instance, Overstrand Municipality, if I'm not mistaken, 2009 or 2011, privatized the water. They gave a company called Viola. I think that is one of the reasons why there are so much exuberant, services in our communities, because the water now, municipality decided to outsource them. The other thing is the issue of administrators. They've got some sort of advisors, and these are private companies, which is the municipality cannot take any decision. They must first go to these private companies to decide if this is the right decision or not. And the municipalities, those private companies are not doing it for free, which means what they are doing, they are paying. So the more money that is going, it's going more to private companies instead of the money going, to areas where it can be able to assist the poor people. The other thing that you have, you raise your rates, and you frustrate that community by not employing them, because there is an agreement in the Western Cape that the locals must be frustrated. Now, foreigners must be employed. Reason being, these locals, they are the ones that they've chosen this government. So they must suffer consequences. They cannot come from Eastern Cape and get work here. They must see where they must go back to Eastern Cape or whatever they come from. So that is one of the political challenges that we are facing in that community. So that is a challenge that definitely it makes, now there is a hate between white and the black community, because you find out when the community is standing up for services, the rich will come up and say, these people are disturbing us. These people are going to cause chaos. We don't want these people to protest. We don't want them to come and close the roads, even if the protest is going to be a peaceful protest. So that is a challenge that we are facing. So the issue of inequality, the issue of racism and white supremacy, I think it plays a vital role to make sure that those communities are being suppressed. So the issue of rates, I must be honest with you, it's a man-made issue. It is done deliberately to frustrate those communities.
Mr. Mamdu, how do you respond to that? Because the question of inequality, of course, also plays out in respect of service delivery in South Africa. And we hear about the privatization of services and the way that those who have means are able sometimes to opt out of service delivery. That can sometimes be to the expense of others around them, sometimes benefit others around them. What do you make of this picture from Zwelihle and what it tells us about the broader picture in South Africa?
No, I think it's a shared experience that many communities across the country have. It is certainly a legacy of apartheid spatial planning, but also the entrenchment of that unjust and unequal delivery of services in the democratic era. So I think what might be interesting to point out here is that in some ways every municipality has the ability to engage in the redistribution of wealth to communities that are in need of greater access to services. And a community like that of Zwelihle and a town like that of Hermanus is a great example where you have the uber-rich situated right next door to the incredibly poor. And what they could in fact opt to do there is to raise the property taxes and rates for those within a certain bracket, those who have a certain level of wealth, in order to facilitate the delivery and adequate delivery of quality services to communities that are poor in proximity to that. But I think beyond that, there's a discussion that needs to be had here around the need to impose progressive taxations on the wealthy at a national level and throughout the society in order to capacitate our municipalities, in order to fill the deficit and the gap that exists so that our communities can provide quality services. I think, look, the idea that we must lay blame on the fact that there's a lot of money owed to municipalities is in some ways, it falls short of a proper analysis. I think we should view in many instances the decision that is taken by people not to pay rates and taxes as a revolt against neoliberal austerity in many ways. Of course, in most instances, it is also because some people are simply unable to pay it. But in that, I think if the political establishment of the day put forward the correct program to impose taxation on the wealthy as it should, and on multinational corporations as well, and capacitate local government, that is what would make a world of difference.
Okay, let's put that
yes.
to Mr. Joel, who of course raised that question, and of course we're also discussing the effect of the privatization of services and what that has on municipalities. But of course, you may want to also respond to the idea of the indebtedness of municipalities and where that comes from.
Well, since the starting point is really that there is a general expectation that a municipality will have a staff complement that would be able to execute the services. But of course, there are instances where municipalities require specialized expertise support, whether it's to deliver a project or just simply provide a legal advice. And in those instances, municipality would be entitled to explore externally the necessary expertise to enable it to make decisions. So decisions are not made outside of the municipality. Decisions are made by the municipal council itself. And in order to make an informed decision, they would require expertise advice on matters. So there is certainly expectation that is acceptable. Secondly, the law also provides, more specifically the Systems Act, Municipal Systems Act, provides for where a municipality feels, after an assessment, proper assessment, that it is better to provide the service through an external provision service provider. It is entitled to do so. So the law itself anticipated that a municipality may have difficulties to provide a service sustainably, and looked at a mechanism that would allow it to outsource but remain accountable for the function itself. So it's important that we understand the use of expertise and tapping into external expertise and the provision of the service by an external role player. It is allowed by the law. Then I must also tap into the point that has been made around affordability itself. There is an acceptance that not everyone will be able to pay for municipal services. And that acceptance is followed through by allowing, from the Constitution up to local government relevant legislation, for municipalities to have indigent registers. What is an indigent register? It is essentially an opportunity provided to households to come forward and complete the necessary documentation that would confirm that they have affordability issues and would not be able to pay for those services. They would then be put onto the indigent register and would enjoy the benefit of free basic services to a certain threshold depending on the service itself. So there is that acknowledgement, there is that acceptance, and funds have been set aside to cover the cost linked to indigency across the country. So it is not as if it is just a general application of the municipal tariffs, whether you can afford it or not. There is provision made to cater for the poor, to cater for those who are less fortunate than others, so that they are able to receive the basic services within the conditions that they find themselves in.
Indeed, and we're going to come back after the break to explore some of these questions in more depth. Tonight we're talking about the cost of municipal services and the delivery of municipal services to people. We've spoken about the case of Zwelihle, which is right near Hermanus, a tale of two places in South Africa, one rich, one poor, and the differentials in the experiences of those two communities. We've also spoken about the extent to which municipalities are indebted, who's to blame for that and who isn't. And when we come back from the break, we'll also delve into that question. Indigent registers and free basic services, to what extent that has actually met its purpose in our country. and more questions of municipal finances that surround municipal services. Stick with us on Unfiltered. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Unfiltered. The cost of service delivery is a key priority for many South African citizens, and tonight we're exploring that cost and trying to understand the pressure under which South Africans are buckling in many cases when dealing with municipal services. On the other hand, the pressures that the government faces to balance its books and keep stable. Mr. Joel, you made an interesting point before the break about the fact that there is provision for indigent households. There are free basic services up to a certain amount of service provision if people go onto that register. The question, I suppose, would be that with the rising cost of living, do you think those thresholds are appropriate for where people actually are in their economic lives, or is there a need to revisit that?
Whilst is where it's a national benchmark that is set, so it applies generally across every single municipality set nationally. Of course, we would have difficulties depending on where you find yourself within the country. That's why the question and the point of differentiation is an important one. Yeah. Because a one size fits all doesn't necessarily mean it's a solution to every challenge that we have. So there are opportunities for us to look at possibly creating a differentiated approach in providing access to free basic services. The difficulty we experience in practice, and linking it to the earlier comment I made that municipalities are owed in excess of 338 billion rands, is that municipalities provide the service, including the basic services, and it is unable to collect from the users for the use of those services. However, a municipality is still forced to pay Eskom because the bulk electricity was used. It's still forced to pay a water board because the water was used. So that money must come from somewhere within a municipal financial management system. So the difficulties that it creates the financial unsustainability of municipalities, because if you have to pay for bulk services but you're unable to collect for it, you would run into the cash flow challenges that a lot of municipalities have run into. So and when you unpack the 338 billion, 72% of it is owed by households. So the remaining 28% is business and government. So we can create a link between that amount and the difficulties that households experience to service their debt for municipal services. And there are a range of reasons why that may find expression, but the reality is that the inability of a municipality to collect for those services provided impacts on its ability to sustainably provide services. So you have to rob Peter to pay for Paul. Because the reality is that we must sustain the provision of services, but it's practically difficult without the financial muscle to do so.
Mr. Mamdu, Mr. Joel makes an interesting point and explains exactly the constraints that municipalities face. But it seems emblematic of a deeper malaise in the state where the citizens don't have the money to pay the municipality doesn't have the money to pay Eskom doesn't have the money to pay the state doesn't have the money to pay its lenders. I mean, all in all, we seem to be in pretty bad financial shape, and no one seems to have the liquidity to actually stabilize our system of service delivery as a country.
Oh, well, look, I mean, this is exactly why we contend that capitalism will dig its own grave. It is a system of political economy that can only go in a downward spiral. That is the only trajectory that it can go, is deeper and deeper into crisis. And we're living through that. We are experiencing that. I mean, we know it in terms of the cost of living crisis. We know it in terms of unemployment, all of these things. Look, I would say that money that does need to come into local government, that does need to capacitate and resource our municipalities to be able to provide basic services that are of a quality standard as they should. that money should come from Treasury. That money should come from the state. And the state must then be able to impose the taxation policies that it needs to be able to generate that income. It must be able to, instead of selling off SOEs and state-owned enterprises, must be able to make sure that they bring in adequate income for the state itself.
But Treasurer, I mean, the fiscus itself is also under the weight of a debt burden. What do you make of that? Because even if Treasury does inject money into the system, that could have other consequences in terms of the fiscus.
Look, I think in some ways the idea that Treasury is under such strain and such a burden, I think it's misleading. The state certainly is the only entity which has the ability to bring in the income that it needs in order to provide for all the people, and it can do that, but it cannot do that within the framework of neoliberal policy. And that is the framework that South Africa is governed by. It is the framework that the most of the world is governed by. And without breaking from that, it will be unable to inject the growth that is needed to make sure and also change and reprioritize and realign its priorities with the needs of our people to make sure that they are met. Just one quick point on very quickly, if you'll indulge me, on the outsourcing of municipal services to private companies. We also hold that these services should be insourced. And that is for two primary reasons. The one is that the outsourcing is a source of corruption. It creates this tenderpreneuring that we have, which is a huge, huge problem that we need to pay more attention to. And two, in order to make sure that that workers are not in precarious positions, have a decent living wage, and are able to lead lives of dignity as well.
Mr. Nzongana, how do you respond to some of the comments that have been made in the segment so far?
Look, Sizwe, what I can tell you is that it's very simple. You know, we are discussing a community, a rich community, just at the back. In fact, just in front of that community, there's an ocean. And there's a mineral called abalone, which is per annum. There is a abalone farm there. It's called Upper Gold. Per annum, they are making $25 million per annum. And now, a can of abalone, which is, let's talk about 65 grams. I mean, you talk about South African revenue, let's say rand, currency, you talk about 250 rand, just a can, 65 grams of abalone. Now, maybe that's 3 pieces. We talk about 5 pieces. That is 400 rand, maybe 100 gram of abalone. Now, 1 can is a salary of 1 worker. And how much do they make? They are making hell of a money. Now, Sizwe, the situation in Hermanas, it's systematic. One, it's very clear that the current system of government is failing us. We have to be clear about that. We talk about policies, we talk about the law. The law does not favor the poor. That is the fact of the matter. Now, once upon a time, that community once came up with a plan of saying, this is our wish list. In this portion of land, we want an abalone farm. That abalone farm is going to cater this community, assist children with bursaries, with education, so that the children can go and work. You know, I mean, they can go to school, study aqua farm, whatever, what they want to study. The same abalone farm was going to assist that community. Definitely, the community was going to be a shareholder, and they will be able to pay some of their rent and all that stuff. Now, here in this community, while they are just living in the belt of the gold, they call it a white gold, you still have this same community that is being discriminated when it comes to jobs in restaurant, still being discriminated in all types of jobs. Now, you still want that community to pay services. That is madness. What is going to happen is, I must be honest with you, one, we will force people to take services by force, which means water, to take water by force. will force people to take electricity by force, because we are not going to tolerate, you know, a capitalist system where the poor in that, I mean, it is done deliberately. There is no, Overstrand municipality is one of the richest municipality in the country. I mean, check the municipal manager there and equate with some of the municipal managers, even with, maybe it's closer to the city of Joburg, municipal manager, in the city of Cape Town, municipal manager with the salary. So you're talking about the rich municipality here, not just a municipality, an ordinary municipality there in Transkei or Ciskei, whatsoever. It's a municipality in the belt with an upper a rich resource. So here, at the back, just at the back of the mountain, you've got Hemel and Arde Valley. The same Hemel and Arde Valley is produced one of the expensive wines in the country. Now, you also have a High Grove, which produce, I mean, strawberry and lettuce for Woolworths and all that stuff. Now, you can't tell me that this community must suffer, and now you must raise rates to accommodate only the filthy rich that are living in this town. At the end of the day, the same people of that community are excluding them when it comes to labor. So we have to change things. We came to the council and say we introduced that the municipality must introduce an amnesty so that all the debts in that town must be scratched. Then after that, we want to monitor why, if you're not in your house, you can lock your house and come to Joburg. Your rates will be much more higher than a person who's staying in his house. And you ask, why is that? They say, no, it's a penalty because when you are not living in your house, services are much more expensive. What is that? So right. That is the answers that you are receiving in that municipality. Here, we must be honest. You are talking about a gentrification Sizwe that is happening throughout the Western Cape so that the poor in the Western Cape can be frustrated. The portions, each and every portion of land that is available, as some particular rich estate for the rich can be built so that a rich particular group, some are the Zionists from Israel, can live in that city. I mean,
right. We're going to have to go to a break. We'll come back after that to round up, get some social media comments and some concluding thoughts from our guests. But tonight we're discussing the fraught question of service delivery and its cost, who bears the burdens of those costs, and how we as a country can emerge from the many debts that our different municipalities face so that ultimately we can deliver services progressively to more people faster and better. Stick with us. We'll be back after the break for our final segment.
Get in touch with SABC News. Call us if you have any news leads, stories, tip-offs, or simply issues you are grappling with as a community. Call us on 011-714-6133. Alternatively, email us at news@sabc.co.za. SABC News, your voice, independent and impartial.
Put yourself right in the center of 30 years of democracy, a journey of triumphs and challenges. Picture the votes that shaped our nation, the highs and lows that define us as Mzansi. Now, as we look back, we invite you to envision your future, to voice your truth.
We have decided
to shut down the school today because we have realized.
Let's celebrate our past, shape our present, and pave the way for a brighter tomorrow. Catch Elections 360 daily, Monday to Thursday, 5 to 5:30 p.m. on SABC1 DTT and all our digital platforms, and let your voice be counted.
Welcome back to Unfiltered. Tonight we're talking about the cost of municipal services. Let's see what you've been saying on social media. I believe we have some comments on X, and let's go to Nogzola, who says, besides being unaffordable, it's becoming impossible to access basic services in South Africa unless you have your own water borehole and energy supply somewhere in a plot of land in a rural homestead. You can be in a city and miss your water back in the rurals. Barry says, why should basic services become unaffordable for the people while our taxpayers' monies are allocated to municipalities to provide our people with good and quality basic services? And finally, Sizwe says, basic services are not even supposed to be charged to any citizen of the country because they are a human right. One way or another, not everyone will afford them, so it's best the national budget allocates funds to municipalities for service delivery and maximizes the tax collected. Mr. Joel, any thoughts to those? Oh, sorry, I believe we have yet another one. Clearly our conversation is generating some okay, that was the final one. So, yes.
Well, thank you very much, Sizwe. Just to re-emphasize, there is an expectation that a municipality will fund its operational costs by 90% with its own revenue. And that revenue comes from surcharges to the users of the basic services of municipalities. The inability of households, there's an acceptance that some would not be able to pay for services, and therefore free basic services are provided for through the Indigent register. So municipalities have come on board through support from national government to try and cover those that are unable to afford for the payment of certain basic services. I think it would be irresponsible for us to call on people to stop paying for services. Essentially, that call will call for the collapse of municipalities. That's basically what we are saying. Let's collapse municipalities, and that would be very irresponsible for us to make such a call. There's a basic accepted principle that there's a user pay principle for the provision of services. Much is being done to cap those costs at a minimum. It is very difficult for municipalities that are price takers, particularly with the high cost of electricity, bulk electricity, and bulk water. So as much as we would want to point the fingers at municipalities, the reality is that we have to make work with what we have at the municipal level, and we have serious difficulties collect those because of reasons given by households, unaffordability, etc., for not paying for services. And that's a reality we have to work with, but we are calling upon households to assist us to sustain municipalities financially, and ultimately ensuring that municipalities are able to provide the services that communities deserve and require.
Mr. Mamdu, your thoughts on social media?
Look, well, the expectation that municipalities should generate 90% of their own revenue, I think it's a silly expectation. Our people cannot make that up for the municipalities. It should absolutely be the role of national government to fill the gap, to subsidize our municipalities, and to ensure that they are resourced well enough to be able to function adequately and effectively. Look, I think it's also worth noting that the Indigent register and the amount of money provided to provide free basic services to those who qualify is simply not enough. It is simply not enough. The stats show and tell us that there are thousands of people who do not receive despite being on that register and being recognized as such. But also, it must be, I mean, look, sorry, at the beginning of the show we had the clip from Zwelihle, where someone who is not on the Indigent register is expected to pay for their water bill, is unable to pay for it and is sitting without water or electricity as a result. And so it also goes to show that, that criteria either needs to be expanded, or we need to create and work towards a situation where we can provide free basic services to all our people.
Mr. Nzongana, any thoughts on the social media comments?
Yeah, look, I hear Joel is talking about unreasonable, I mean, irresponsible a strategy of saying people, they will rather take, services by force and all that stuff. I mean, the question I will ask him, what will the ordinary person do who's unemployed, does not have any money, any income, sitting there at home and must pay a bill of 5,000 rand? I mean, what do you expect that particular individual must, what that person must do? And the same South African is, while he's sitting here frustrated, is seeing someone from another country carrying a bag going to work. I mean, how will that particular person feel? I mean, that is a frustration. Here I'm speaking what people are frustrated, Sizwe. And we have to be honest about that. I mean, for us to try to be superficial and try to be diplomatic, I mean, not raise these issues and tell the anger of the people, because people are frustrated. I think in Hermanus in 2018, you are aware that the town was closed almost 3 months. It was closed. Why? And we've been saying to the municipality, people are angry, and they kept on ignoring the people. And we are saying it again. People are angry. Recently, we just stopped a xenophobic attack in the same town, and we stopped it. We said to our people, no, the problem is not Zimbabweans. The problem is not Malawians. The problem is the business that are in cahoots with the municipality to frustrate locals. Because you can't say people must rent at the same time you don't want to hire them. People are unemployed, but you still expect them to pay rents. That is unacceptable.
So where to from here, Mr. Nzongana? And I'll ask you to be brief so that I can ask the rest of our panelists to answer that question before we close.
Where to here? I mean, one, overstrand municipality must scrap all those debts. I mean, give amnesty to the people, and they must revisit how they charge people. And the issue of indigent grant, they must go door to door, because they go to the community hall and sit there. Some people are at work. If you can't even take a sick leave or say a day off in these farms, and you come back at work, overstrand municipalities, they knock off. So they must go door to door and register people for indigent grant. That is what can work. Or else, something is going to happen in that municipality.
Mr. Mamdu, your thoughts on where to from here?
Look, I've said and emphasized it multiple times throughout the discussion. We need to put an end to austerity budgeting entirely. We need to have greater public spending into infrastructure and into capacitating and resourcing our municipalities to be able to function. Beyond that, we also need to put an end to outsourcing of municipal services and to do this in the interest of rooting out corruption and in the interest of providing dignity and security for workers.
Right. No. And Mr. Joel, we'll give you the last word.
Well, the first one, Sizwe, would be to call upon those that are having affordability challenges to approach a municipality and enter into discussions, whether it is getting onto the indigent register or a repayment arrangement linked to their affordability. That would be the first one. The second one would be municipalities are approving as we speak their draft budgets for the next financial year, which also incorporate what their likely charges are going to be for services into the new financial year starting from the 1st of July. So communities are encouraged to become part of the public participation processes that municipalities will be embarking upon, raise their issues there so that they get the necessary response. The last one would be to call upon those who are able to afford municipal services but are withholding payment, encouraging them to come forward and pay for those services so that we are able to keep the lights on, ensuring that the water runs, taps are working, and that municipalities are able to sustain the delivery of services.
Well, thank you very much to all my panelists this evening for giving us an interesting and a panoramic view from many different perspectives on the pressures that South Africans are facing. South Africans are in a bind. South Africa is in a bind. Citizens are squeezed between high charges, high prices, high rates, and municipalities are squeezed because they are owed money from various sectors. We're between a rock and a hard place, but how do we ultimately extricate ourselves from these binds and generate a municipal landscape that delivers services efficiently and equitably to the South African people? That's the question that we have covered this evening with our panel. That's the question which we pose to you for further conversation on social media at Unfiltered SABC. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to you for watching for another episode of Unfiltered News, Unfiltered Views, and Unfiltered Conversations. Hope you have a great night.